Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
Have you ever felt like your life was a dress that didn't quite fit? Too tight in some places, too loose in others, made from fabric that scratched against your skin every time you moved. That's exactly how I felt the night I first saw her workshop. Light glowing like a beacon through the darkness. I'm Maria, and this is the story of how a single moment of curiosity changed everything I thought I knew about love, authenticity, and who I was meant to be. It was a Tuesday in October when I first noticed the warm golden light spilling from the small studio apartment across the courtyard from mine. The building was old, one of those charming Brooklyn brownstones with thin walls and even thinner bank accounts for most of its residents. I'd been living there for 2 years, designing clothes for a mid-tier fashion house by day and sketching my real dreams by night. But that particular evening, as I sat by my window with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands, I couldn't help but wonder who was working so late. The light had a quality to it that drew me in, soft, focused, purposeful. It wasn't the harsh glare of someone scrolling through their phone or the blue flicker of a television. This was the light of creation, of someone lost in their craft. And God, did I understand that feeling. My boyfriend Eric had been texting me all evening, his messages growing increasingly demanding. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? We need to talk about your little hobby. That's what he called my design work, my little hobby. As if the sketches scattered across my desk, the fabric samples I collected over years, the dreams I'd been nurturing since childhood were just something to pass the time. I turned my phone face down and continued watching that mysterious light. 3 days later, fate intervened in the way it sometimes does, unexpectedly and in the most ordinary of places. I was browsing the design section at the local bookstore, running my fingers along the spines of books about fashion history and textile arts, when I heard a voice behind me. That one's incredible, she said, pointing to a book about avant-garde fashion designers of the 1980s. Rei Kawakubo changed everything about how we think about beauty and imperfection. I turned around and felt something shift inside my chest. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun secured with what looked like a vintage brooch. Her clothes were clearly handmade, a flowing skirt in deep burgundy, paired with a fitted blazer that had been altered with artistic precision. But it was her hands that captivated me. They were the hands of someone who created things, strong and graceful, with small calluses from years of detailed work. I'm Claudia, she said, extending one of those beautiful hands. Maria, I replied, suddenly very aware of my own appearance. I was wearing one of my designs, but next to her effortless elegance, I felt overdressed and somehow inauthentic. We talked for over an hour in that bookstore, moving from fashion to literature to our shared love of old movies. She had this way of listening that made me feel like every word I said mattered. When I mentioned that I was a designer, her eyes lit up with genuine interest. What kind of designs? She asked. During the day, I work for a commercial brand, but at night, ... I hesitated, thinking of Eric's dismissive comments. At night, I work on my own pieces. Things that probably won't sell but feel true to me. Those are the most important pieces, she said with such conviction that I almost believed her. As we prepared to leave, she mentioned that she was a seamstress and pattern maker, working from her home studio. It's the apartment with the light that's always on, she said with a laugh. I'm a bit of a night owl. My heart skipped. The light across from the courtyard, that's me. Building 247, apartment 3B. You must be in the building across from mine. The coincidence felt like destiny. That night, Eric came over unannounced, as he had a habit of doing. He was in one of his moods, the kind where everything I did was wrong, where my ambitions were selfish, where my dreams were impractical fantasies that were keeping me from focusing on us. You've been distant lately, he said, pacing around my small living room like a caged animal. Always buried in your sketches, always making excuses about why you can't spend time with me. I was sitting on my couch, watching Claudia's light glow across the courtyard. I'm working, Eric. You know, this is important to me. More important than our relationship. His voice had that edge to it that made my stomach clench. I'm starting to think you don't appreciate what we have. What we had. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt genuinely happy with Eric. The last time he'd supported one of my dreams or celebrated one of my small victories. The memories were becoming harder and harder to find. I'm going to bed, I said, standing up. We can talk about this tomorrow when you're calmer. Don't walk away from me, Maria. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make his point. We're talking about this now? I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then across the courtyard to that warm, welcoming light. Something inside me broke free. Let go of me, I said quietly. He did, but his eyes remained cold. You're changing, and I don't like it. After he left, I sat by my window until nearly dawn, watching Claudia's light and thinking about change. Maybe Eric was right. Maybe I was changing, and maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The next week brought an unexpected opportunity. I was walking past Claudia's building when I saw her struggling with several large bolts of fabric, trying to maneuver them through the narrow entrance while balancing her keys and a coffee cup. Need help? I called out, already crossing the street. Her face broke into a grateful smile. Maria, perfect timing. I just picked up these beautiful silks from an estate sale, but I think I may have overestimated my carrying capacity. Together, we carried the fabric up 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. When she opened the door, I stepped into a world that took my breath away. The space was small but transformed. Every surface was organized with purpose, spools of thread arranged by color, patterns hanging from lines stretched across the room, a cutting table that doubled as a desk covered with sketches and fabric samples. The sewing machine was vintage but clearly well maintained, positioned near the large window that looked out over the courtyard. This was where that magical light came from. Welcome to my sanctuary, Claudia said, setting down the fabric bolts. It's not much, but it's mine. It's perfect, I whispered, and I meant it. The space radiated creativity and authenticity in a way that made my own apartment feel sterile by comparison. She put on some music, something soft and jazzy, and began sorting through the new fabric while I examined her current projects. There was a dress in progress that looked like it had been inspired by 1940s Hollywood glamour, but with modern, sustainable materials. A series of tops with hand-embroidered details that would have taken weeks to complete. Everything showed the mark of someone who cared deeply about their craft. Can I ask you something? I said, running my hand along a particular beautiful piece of silk. How do you do it? How do you make everything so authentic? She looked up from her sorting, considering the question seriously. I think authenticity comes from honoring what speaks to you, even when other people don't understand it, especially then. Her words hit me like a physical thing. I thought about Eric's constant criticism, his way of making me feel like my dreams were silly or selfish. I thought about my day job, creating clothes that felt like costumes for a life I didn't want to live. I don't think I've been very authentic lately, I admitted. Claudia set down the fabric she was holding and came to stand beside me. She was close enough that I could smell her perfume, something subtle and warm, like vanilla and cedar. It's never too late to start, she said softly. That night, I dreamed about fabric and light and hands that created beautiful things. I woke up feeling more rested than I had in months, despite having stayed at Claudia's workshop until nearly midnight, talking about design and dreams and the courage it takes to build a life that feels true. Over the next few weeks, I found myself gravitating toward Claudia's workshop like a moth to flame. She was working on a collection for a small boutique in Manhattan, and she'd invited me to collaborate on a few pieces. Working beside her felt like discovering a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. We complemented each other's skills. My eye for commercial appeal balanced her artistic vision, while her technical expertise brought my sketches to life in ways I'd never imagined possible. But Eric was growing increasingly suspicious and hostile about my new friendship. You're obsessed with this woman, he said one evening, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. It's not healthy, Maria. People are going to start talking. Talking about what? I asked, though something in my chest fluttered with anxiety. You know what I mean? His smile was cold. 2 women spending all that time together, working on your little projects. It looks suspicious. The word hung in the air between us like a threat. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from anger. Claudia is my friend, I said carefully. She's helping me develop my skills as a designer. Right, your skills. Eric moved closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. Tell me something, Maria. When you're over there with her late at night, what exactly are you working on? The insinuation in his voice made my skin crawl. But underneath my revulsion, I felt something else, a spark of recognition, as if he'd identified something I hadn't been ready to acknowledge. I think you should leave, I said. His expression darkened. Don't turn this around on me. I'm trying to protect you from making a mistake that could ruin your reputation, your career, our future, our future. The phrase felt like a prison sentence. After Eric left, I sat in my apartment, staring across the courtyard at Claudia's workshop. The light was on as always, and I could see her silhouette moving around the space. I thought about Eric's accusations, his implications, his threats disguised as concern. And then I thought about how I felt when I was with Claudia, alive, inspired, understood in ways I'd never experienced before. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Claudia answered my knock with flour in her hair and an apron tied around her waist. Maria, I was just taking a break to make some cookies. Perfect timing. Her kitchen was tiny but cozy, filled with the warm scent of vanilla and brown sugar. She poured me a glass of wine and handed me a cookie that was still warm from the oven. You look troubled, she said, settling into the chair across from me at her small dining table. I told her about Eric's visit, his accusations, his threats. As I spoke, I watched her face change from concern to anger to something that looked almost like fear. Maria, she said when I finished, there's something I need to tell you about Eric. My heart began to race. What do you mean? She got up and went to her desk, returning with a folder full of newspaper clippings and printed articles. After you told me about some of the things he said and done, I started doing some research. Eric isn't just controlling, he's dangerous. The articles detailed a pattern I hadn't seen before. Eric had been in 2 previous long-term relationships, both of which had ended badly. One ex-girlfriend had filed a restraining order that was later dropped. Another had been hospitalized after what was reported as an accident that had all the hallmarks of domestic violence. There's more, Claudia said quietly. I think he's been watching me, following me. I've seen his car parked across from the bookstore where we met, outside the fabric district when I'm shopping for supplies. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but she showed me photos she'd taken with her phone, Eric's distinctive blue sedan parked in locations where he had no business being, always with a clear view of wherever Claudia happened to be. I felt sick. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to scare you unnecessarily. But after what you just told me about tonight, she reached across the table and took my hand. Maria, I'm worried about you. About both of us. Her hand was warm and steady, and I realized I felt safer in that moment than I had in months. The recognition hit me like a wave. This was what it felt like to be truly cared for, to be with someone who wanted to protect you. Not to control you, but because they valued your well-being above their own comfort. I need to ask you something, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, and I need you to be honest with me. She nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. When you look at me, what do you see? Her answer came without hesitation. I see someone brave and talented and beautiful, someone who's been taught to make herself smaller than she really is. I see someone who deserves to be loved for exactly who she is, not who someone else wants her to be. The tears came then, fast and hot and full of relief I hadn't known I'd been carrying. Claudia moved her chair closer and pulled me into her arms, and I let myself be held in a way that felt both completely new and like coming home. I don't know what this means, I whispered against her shoulder. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You don't have to know right now, she said, her hand stroking my hair. You just have to be brave enough to find out. We talked until sunrise, sharing stories about our past, our fears, our dreams for the future. I learned that Claudia had struggled with her own journey of self-discovery, that she'd lost friends and family members who couldn't accept her authenticity. She'd built her life carefully and deliberately, surrounding herself with people who loved and supported her unconditionally. It's not always easy, she admitted, but it's honest. And honest is the only way I know how to live anymore. As the sun came up over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I made a decision that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. I was going to break up with Eric, but first I was going to kiss Claudia. She must have seen the intention in my eyes because she moved closer, her hand coming up to cup my cheek. Are you sure? She whispered. Instead of answering with words, I closed the distance between us. The kiss was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as we both gave in to the attraction that had been building between us for weeks. It felt like everything clicked into place, all the confusion, all the restlessness, all the sense that something had been missing from my life. This was what I'd been searching for without even knowing it. When we finally broke apart, Claudia smiled. "Good morning, Maria." "Good morning," I replied, and for the first time in years, I meant it. The next few days passed in a blur of planning and preparation. I knew that breaking up with Eric wouldn't be simple. Men like him didn't let go easily, especially when they sensed they were losing control. Claudia and I decided that I should end things in a public place with witnesses around, and that she would be nearby in case things went badly. We chose a coffee shop near my office, somewhere Eric would feel the need to maintain his public persona. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm and firm no matter how he responded. But Eric was smarter than I'd given him credit for. Instead of meeting me at the coffee shop, he showed up at my apartment that evening with flowers and an apology that sounded like it had been crafted by a marketing team. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice warm and contrite, "about your dreams, your design work. I realize I haven't been as supportive as I should be." I stood in my doorway, not inviting him in. "Eric, I think we need to talk. That's exactly what I want to do." He held up the flowers, expensive roses that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a week. "I want to make things right between us." "I don't think that's possible anymore." His smile flickered, just for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I think we should break up. We want different things, Eric. We're not compatible." The mask slipped completely then. His expression hardened, and he pushed past me into my apartment without invitation. "This is about her, isn't it?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Your little friend across the courtyard." My heart began to race, but I forced myself to remain calm. "This is about us, Eric, about the fact that we don't make each other happy anymore. Don't lie to me, Maria." He moved closer, and I instinctively backed toward my phone, which was charging on the kitchen counter. "I know what's been going on. I've seen you with her. Nothing is going on. Claudia is my friend. Claudia." He said her name like it tasted bitter. "Did you know your friend has a record?" I stopped moving. "What?" Eric pulled out his phone and showed me a series of screenshots, police reports, court documents, newspaper articles. Claudia Rodriguez, arrested 3 years ago in connection with the death of her sister. The charges were dropped, but that doesn't mean she's innocent. The blood drained from my face as I read the headlines. Claudia's sister had died in what was ruled an accidental overdose, but there had been questions about the circumstances. Claudia had been the one to find the body, had been the last person to see her sister alive. "You're lying," I whispered. "Am I?" Eric's smile was triumphant. "Ask her about Sophia. Ask her why she really moved to Brooklyn, why she keeps to herself, why she works alone at night. Ask her what really happened that night her sister died." He left then, taking his roses with him, but leaving behind a poison that spread through my thoughts like ink in water. I spent the rest of the evening staring at Claudia's workshop light, my mind reeling with questions and doubts. Everything Eric had shown me could be explained, innocent until proven guilty, charges dropped, accidental death. But the seed of uncertainty had been planted, and I hated myself for letting it grow. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone buzzing with notifications. Eric had been busy overnight, sending me link after link to articles about Claudia's past. Some were legitimate news reports. Others looked like they'd been pulled from gossip blogs and conspiracy theory websites. All of them painted a picture of a woman with dark secrets and dangerous connections. I knew I should delete them without reading them. I knew Eric was trying to manipulate me, to drive a wedge between Claudia and me. But doubt is a powerful thing, and once it takes root, it's hard to uproot. When Claudia texted to invite me over for coffee, I found myself making excuses. When she suggested we work on our collection, I claimed I was too busy with my day job. For 3 days, I avoided her while warring with myself about what to believe. Finally, she showed up at my door. "Okay," she said when I answered her knock. "What's going on?" "You've been avoiding me, and I can see you watching my apartment from your window. If I did something wrong, I need you to tell me what it was." Looking at her, really looking at her, with her concerned eyes and her gentle expression, I felt ashamed of my doubts. This was Claudia, who made me cookies when I was sad, who shared her creative space with me, who listened to my dreams. Like they mattered. Whatever had happened in her past, she deserved the chance to tell me her side of the story. "Come in," I said. "There's something we need to talk about." I showed her the articles Eric had sent, watched her face go pale as She recognized the headlines. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. My sister Sophia was an addict, she said finally. She'd been struggling with substance abuse since high school, in and out of rehab, making promises she couldn't keep. I moved to Los Angeles to be closer to her, to try to help her get clean. She sat down heavily on my couch, her hands clasped in her lap. The night she died, she called me. She was high, scared, talking about people who were after her. She'd gotten involved with some dangerous dealers, owed them money. I went to her apartment to try to get her to come home with me to keep her safe. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. By the time I got there, it was too late. The paramedics said she'd been dead for at least an hour, but her apartment had been ransacked and there were signs of a struggle. The police investigated it as a potential homicide, but they couldn't prove anything. The dealers she'd been involved with had alibis. I moved to sit beside her on the couch, taking her hand in mine. I'm so sorry, Claudia. The worst part was the questions, the suspicion. People wondered why I was the last person she'd called, why I'd waited so long to go to her apartment, whether I might have been involved somehow. It was like losing her all over again every day. She looked up at me, her eyes red with unshed tears. That's why I moved to Brooklyn. I needed to start over somewhere nobody knew my story, where I could grieve in peace and try to build something positive from all that pain. I felt sick with shame for doubting her, for letting Eric's poison take root in my mind. I should have trusted you. I should have asked you directly instead of letting him get in my head. He's trying to isolate you, Claudia said. That's what abusers do. They drive wedges between their victims and anyone who might offer support or a different perspective. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone began to ring. Eric's name flashed on the screen. Don't answer it, Claudia said. But I was tired of running, tired of being afraid. I answered the call and put it on. Speaker. Maria, baby, I've been thinking about our conversation the other night. Eric's voice filled my living room, sickeningly sweet. I think I was too harsh. Maybe we can work things out. There's nothing to work out, Eric. We're done. A pause. I really don't think you want to do this. Not when your little friend has so much to lose. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Claudia and I looked at each other, fear passing between us like an electric current. What's that supposed to mean? I asked. It means accidents happen. Maria, people get hurt when they don't mind their own business. It would be terrible if something happened to Claudia's workshop. All those beautiful fabrics, those irreplaceable patterns. So flammable, my blood ran cold. Are you threatening her? I'm protecting what's mine, Eric said, his mask finally slipping completely. You belong to me, Maria. You always have. And if some disturbed woman with a history of violence thinks she can interfere with that, she's going to learn otherwise. Claudia grabbed my arm and shook her head frantically, mouthing, hang up, but I was past the point of backing down. I don't belong to you, I said. I never did. And if you threaten Claudia again, I'll call the police. Eric's laugh was cold and humorless. Go ahead, call them. Tell them your girlfriend is a suspected murderer who's been stalking you, manipulating you, isolating you from people who actually care about you. See who they believe. The line went dead. Claudia was already moving, pulling her laptop from her bag and opening it on my coffee table. We need to document everything, she said. Every threat, every incident of stalking, every attempt at intimidation. If he's escalating, we need to be prepared. Should we call the police now? She shook her head. Not yet. We need evidence, witnesses, a clear pattern of behavior. Right now, it's our word against his, and he's right. I don't exactly look like the victim in this scenario. Over the next few hours, we compiled everything we could think of. Screenshots of Eric's messages, photos of his car in places he shouldn't have been, documentation of his previous relationships and their violent endings. Claudia also reached out to a friend of hers, a private investigator named Detective Sarah Martinez, who specialized in domestic violence cases. Sarah helped me navigate the investigation into Sophia's death, Claudia explained. She knows my history and she believes in my innocence. If anyone can help us build a case against Eric, it's her. Detective Martinez arrived at my apartment that evening, a compact woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to our story without interruption, taking notes and asking clarifying questions about timeline and evidence. Eric Jameson, she said when we finished, consulting her notes. I've seen his name before. There was a case about 6 months ago A young woman named Rebecca Chen who was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend. The harassment stopped abruptly when she got a restraining order, but she said the guy was smart, careful about not leaving evidence. My heart sank. So there's nothing we can do? I didn't say that. Detective Martinez smiled grimly. Men like Eric have a fatal flaw, their egos. They can't stand being rejected, can't stand losing control. If we're strategic about this, we can get him to reveal his true nature in a way that leaves no room for doubt. The plan she outlined was risky but elegant in its simplicity. I would agree to meet Eric for what he thought was a reconciliation, but the meeting would be recorded and monitored. If Eric made threats or revealed the extent of his stalking and harassment, we'd have the evidence we needed for a restraining order and possible criminal charges. The key is to make him feel like he's won, Detective Martinez explained. Men like him can't resist gloating when they think they've regained control. 2 days later, I sat in a small cafe in downtown Brooklyn, a wire taped to my chest and Detective Martinez positioned at a nearby table. My hands were shaking as I waited for Eric to arrive, but underneath the fear, I felt something else, determination. This was my chance to take back control of my life. Eric walked in exactly on time, his smile confident and self-satisfied. He dressed carefully for the occasion, expensive suit, fresh haircut, cologne that probably costs more than most people's rent. He was playing the part of the successful boyfriend, graciously taking back his wayward girlfriend. "Maria," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look beautiful. I've missed you." "Thank you for meeting me," I said, forcing myself to sound contrite. "I've been thinking about what you said about us." His eyes lit up with triumph. "I knew you'd come to your senses. That woman was poisoning your mind, turning you against me." "You were right about Claudia," I lied, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I did some research after our last conversation, and I found out about her sister, about the investigation." "I can't believe I trusted someone like that." Eric leaned forward, his expression eager. "She's dangerous, Maria, unstable. I was trying to protect you from her." "How did you find out about her past?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I have resources," he said vaguely. "Friends who know how to dig up information when I need it. The moment I saw how she was influencing you, I knew I had to act." "You've been watching her." It wasn't a question, and Eric didn't deny it. Someone had to. "She was clearly obsessed with you, following you around, manipulating you into spending time with her. I had to document her behavior in case we needed evidence for a restraining order." The casual way he admitted to stalking Claudia made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to nod sympathetically. "That must have been difficult for you, having to protect me like that." "You have no idea." Eric reached across the table and took my hand, his grip possessive. "But it's over now. We can put this whole episode behind us and focus on our future together." "What kind of future?" I asked, letting him think I was interested. His smile widened. "I've been thinking about that. I think it's time we took the next step, moved in together, maybe got engaged. But first, you need to quit that job and focus on being a real designer. I can support us both while you work on your little hobby." There it was again, my little hobby. Even in victory, he couldn't resist diminishing my dreams. "That sounds wonderful," I lied. "But what about Claudia? What if she tries to contact me?" Eric's expression darkened. "She won't. I've made it very clear to her that any further contact with you would be ... inadvisable." "What do you mean?" "Let's just say I've explained the situation in terms she can understand. Women like her, with violent histories and suspicious pasts, need to be very careful about their reputations." One phone call to her landlord about the kind of dangerous activities going on in that workshop. One anonymous tip to the police about her connection to drug dealers ... It wouldn't take much to destroy the little life she's built here. My blood ran cold, but I forced myself to remain calm. "You've thought of everything." "I protect what's mine, Maria. Always." He squeezed my hand tighter, hard enough to hurt. "And you're mine. You always have been, you always will be. The sooner you accept that, the happier we'll both be." I looked into his eyes and saw the truth I'd been trying to deny for months. Eric didn't love me. He owned me, or thought. He did. I was a possession to him, something to be controlled and displayed and punished when I didn't behave according to his wishes. But I also saw something else in his expression, the smugness of a man who thought he'd won, who believed his threats and manipulations had successfully isolated me from anyone who might help me escape his control. He was wrong. "I understand," I said softly. I'm sorry I doubted you. Eric's smile was triumphant. I forgive you, baby. Now, let's go back to your place and celebrate our new beginning. That's when Detective Martinez moved in. Eric Jameson, she said, appearing at our table with her badge visible. I'm Detective Martinez, NYPD. I need you to come with me for questioning regarding charges of stalking, harassment, and making terroristic threats. Eric's face went white, then red with rage. This is entrapment. You can't actually, we can, Detective Martinez said calmly. You just confessed to stalking Ms. Rodriguez, threatened to destroy her property and falsely report her to authorities, and made threats against Ms. Garcia's safety, all of which was recorded with her consent. As Eric was led away in handcuffs, he turned back to me with an expression of pure hatred. This isn't over, Maria. You'll regret this. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of his threats. I was free. The aftermath moved quickly. The recording from our meeting, combined with the evidence Claudia and I had compiled, was more than enough for a restraining order and criminal charges. Eric's previous victims came forward once they learned about his arrest, adding their voices to a pattern of abuse and intimidation that could no longer be ignored or dismissed. Detective Martinez also uncovered something else during her investigation. Eric had been planning to escalate his campaign against Claudia. They found evidence in his apartment of surveillance equipment, photographs taken with telephoto lenses, and detailed notes about her daily routines. There were also supplies that could be used for arson, along with plans of her building and notes about fire exits and security systems. He was building up to something, Detective Martinez told us. You stopped this just in time. 3 months later, Eric was sentenced to 2 years in prison for stalking, harassment, and conspiracy to commit arson. He was also required to undergo counseling and was prohibited from contacting either Claudia or me for 5 years after his release. But by then, I had moved on to more important things. Claudia and I spent the weeks following Eric's arrest getting to know each other without the shadow of his threats hanging over us. What I discovered was that everything I'd felt about her was real. The attraction, the connection, the sense. That we understood each other in ways that went beyond words. Our relationship developed naturally, organically, without the pressure and control that had characterized my time with Eric. Claudia never demanded to know where I was or who I was. She never diminished my dreams or made me feel like I had to choose between her and my ambitions. Instead, she supported and encouraged me, celebrating my successes and helping me learn from my failures. 6 months after Eric's arrest, we opened our boutique. It was a small space in a trendy part of Brooklyn, just big enough for a workshop, a small showroom, and a tiny office where we handled the business side of things. We called it Authenticity, a name that captured everything we believed about fashion, about life, about the courage it takes to be truly yourself. Our clothes were unlike anything else on the market, sustainable, ethically made, designed for real women living real lives. We combined my eye for commercial appeal with Claudia's artistic vision and technical expertise, creating pieces that were both beautiful and practical, sophisticated and accessible. The boutique was an immediate success. Our first collection sold out within 2 weeks, and we had a waiting list of customers eager to see what we would create next. Fashion bloggers started featuring our pieces, and we were invited to participate in sustainable fashion shows and ethical design conferences. But more than the commercial success, I was proud of what we had built together, a business that reflected our values, a creative partnership that brought out the best in both of us, a life that felt authentic and true. One evening, almost a year after we first met, I was working late in the boutique when Claudia appeared with 2 cups of coffee and that smile that still made my heart skip a beat. Working late again? She teased, settling into the chair beside my cutting table. Says the woman who used to keep her workshop light on until dawn, I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. She laughed, and the sound filled our small space with warmth. That feels like a lifetime ago. I looked around at what we had built together, the racks of our latest designs, the cutting table where we'd spent countless hours bringing our visions to life, the small seating area where customers could relax while we made alterations. But most of all, I looked at Claudia, her dark eyes reflecting the soft lighting we'd chosen for the space, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, those beautiful, creative hands that had helped me discover who I really was. Do you ever regret it? I asked. Everything that happened, all the drama and danger. Sometimes I wonder if your life would have been simpler if you'd never met me. Claudia set down her coffee and moved closer, taking my hands in hers. Maria, meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not just because of this, she gestured around the boutique, but because you helped me remember what it felt like to hope again. After Sophia died, after all the questions and suspicions, I thought I was destined to live my life alone, in the shadows. You brought me back into the light. I felt tears prick at my eyes. You saved me too. I didn't even realize how lost I was until I found you. We saved each other, she said softly, and then she kissed me with all the tenderness and passion that had characterized our relationship from the beginning. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead against hers. I love you, Claudia Rodriguez. I love you too, Maria, more than I ever thought possible. As we sat there in our boutique, surrounded by the tangible proof of our dreams made real, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The fear, the doubt, the danger we'd faced together. The courage it had taken to choose authenticity over security, love over control, truth over the comfortable lies I'd been telling myself about what my life should look like. I thought about Eric serving his sentence and hopefully learning to examine the toxic beliefs that had driven him to try to destroy what he couldn't control. I thought about the other women who had found the strength to come forward, adding their voices to a chorus that couldn't be silenced or dismissed. But mostly, I thought about the future Claudia and I were building together, not just as business partners, but as life partners. We'd talked about expanding the boutique, maybe opening a second location. We'd discussed teaching design workshops for young women, sharing not just our technical skills, but our story of finding the courage to live authentically. What are you thinking about? Claudia asked, noticing my distant expression. The future, I said. Our future. She smiled and squeezed my hands. What do you see? I looked into her eyes and saw everything I'd been searching for without knowing it. Love without conditions, partnership without competition, support without control. I saw morning coffee and late night conversations, creative collaboration, and quiet companionship. I saw challenges we'd face together and victories we'd celebrate as a team. I see us, I said simply. I see us being happy. And for the first time in my adult life, I truly believed it was possible. The night Eric was arrested, Detective Martinez had told us something that stuck with me. The best revenge against someone who tried to control you is living your life exactly as you choose, she'd said. Success, happiness, authenticity. Those are the things that prove they never really had power over you. Looking around our boutique, holding Claudia's hands in mine, I realized we'd achieved the ultimate victory. We'd taken the worst thing that had happened to us and transformed it into something beautiful. We'd refused to let fear define our choices or limit our dreams. Eric had been wrong about so many things, but he'd been right about one. I had changed. I was no longer the woman who doubted her own dreams, who accepted less than she deserved, who allowed others to define her worth. I was someone who had learned to trust her instincts, to value her own voice, to choose love over fear, even when it required courage I didn't know I possessed. Come on, Claudia said, standing and pulling me to my feet. Let's go home. Home. The word had taken on new meaning over the past year. Home wasn't just the apartment we'd moved into together, with its light-filled rooms and space for both of our creative pursuits. Home was wherever we were together, whatever we were building, together, whoever we were becoming together. As we walked through the Brooklyn streets toward our apartment, our hands intertwined, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this point. The fear and uncertainty, the moments of doubt and danger, they'd all been worth it to arrive at this place of peace and possibility. The workshop light that had first caught my attention was no longer across a courtyard, mysterious and distant. Now it was part of my daily life, part of our shared story, part of the love we'd built together, one careful stitch at a time. We'd created something beautiful, not just the boutique, not just our individual designs, but a life that felt authentic and true. A love that was based on mutual respect and shared dreams rather than possession and control. A partnership that brought out the best in both of us while allowing us to remain fully ourselves. That night, as we lay in bed in the apartment we'd made our own, Claudia traced patterns on my skin with her fingertips, her touch gentle and reverent. Thank you, she whispered in the darkness. For what? For being brave enough to cross the courtyard that first night. For trusting me even when it was difficult. For choosing love over fear. I turned in her arms so I could see her face in the moonlight streaming through our bedroom window. Thank you for keeping your workshop light on, for creating a space so beautiful and authentic that I couldn't resist being drawn to it, for showing me what it looks like to live with integrity and courage. She kissed me softly, and I tasted salt on her lips, tears of joy, of relief, of gratitude for the love we'd found in the most unexpected of circumstances. I used to think that light was just practical, she murmured against my lips. A way to see my work clearly, to stay focused on the details that mattered. But now I think it was something else, a beacon, calling you home to me. As I drifted off to sleep in Claudia's arms, I thought about all the lights that had guided me to this moment. The workshop light that had first caught my attention, drawing me across the courtyard and into a new understanding of myself. The light of recognition in Claudia's eyes when she looked at my designs and saw their value. The light of truth that had finally illuminated Eric's manipulations and freed me from his control.